This morning I happened to be reading a testimony of a former Zeta that he gave in a U.S. courtroom, and he was talking about Zeta 40, this guy named Miguel Trevino, who was one of the guys who was extradited, and he killed thousands and thousands of people. Well, his organization killed thousands. He alone, though, and this was part of the testimony, was involved in hundreds and hundreds of killing. The person asking the questions was saying, did he kill 300? And the guy's like, oh yeah, more than 300. Did he kill 500? Oh yeah, easily 500. This guy alone killed 500. I mean, he loved being in those, he was a caricature. He was one of those people that you would see in these TV movies or something. You'd say, there's no way that guy exists. Miguel Trevino was that guy. He was a psychopath. So like, these aren't small figures. So you've got that aspect. But then on the flip side of it, you've got a Trump administration that is dismantling these mechanisms by which certain criminal activities, in particular money laundering, and movement of money in cryptocurrency, and those operations are being systematically dismantled. So you've got, on the one hand, them being able to squeeze governments to extraditing, and then on the other hand, they're dismantling the mechanisms and the organizations and the units inside of the United States government that are keeping watch over some of the most important ways in which you can squeeze criminal groups, which is obviously the whole adage of follow the money. So you've got a lot of contradictory things happening at the same time. And we're gonna see how this plays out, but it'll play out in these differing ways. In some ways there may be, positive impacts, and in some ways there might be really negative impacts.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm gonna get to money laundering later, so it's awesome that you just mentioned that, because there's a lot of questions I have about how they even get into the money laundering space and have so much success. But we'll talk about that later. You mentioned the prisoners that they gave up, and for me, I said in my last interview, I almost feel it was just a sign of good faith, since they were already captured and they're in prison. You know, they didn't get anyone who was actively in the space doing it. It was those who were already captured. And so I thought it was almost like, yes, we're helping. Yes, we're doing something, but this is the most we're going to do for now, almost like a sign of good faith. Do you feel the same as that, or do you feel like it was a bigger task that they did that?
Well, it wasn't nothing. Yes, maybe in a way these guys were off the radar for a long time, out of the game, so to say, but they weren't necessarily out of the game. There was the notion that the Zetas were still running their criminal operations from jail. So it's not nothing that you take those two guys, in particular those two leaders, the two Zeta leaders, 40 y 43, out of commission, so to say, when you move them to the U.S. They were also very actively trying to get Zeta 40, Miguel Trevino, out of jail. And they were getting pretty close. They had 6 different witnesses, at least, I'm going to say witnesses, use that word very loosely, because they had essentially coerced these people into saying that the person who was arrested, who the Mexican government claimed was Zeta 40, Miguel Trevino, was not Miguel Trevino. And they had convinced the judge of it already, and they had moved to the higher courts. And this was going to be their argument to get Trevino out of jail. It's not nothing. There was a possibility he was going to get out. So I would say, and then the third thing about that is just that they had been not extraditing him, even though the U.S. had been requesting this for years. So there's something there. But yeah, there's another element of this where it's just window dressing. It's just for show. The Canadians did this as well. Like, the Canadians had already done all of the things the Trump administration put on their fentanyl wish list, there is a big cartel presence in Mexico, but it doesn't mean there's nothing. Of course, they're going to have representatives there if they're moving any significant quantities of drugs through there. They have longstanding contacts with motorcycle gangs there. And those contacts have also, the Canadian contacts have been found in Mexico. So there's a longstanding relationship between outlaw motorcycle gangs in Canada and Mexican criminal groups. Why would we think there would be anything different as it relates to synthetic drugs? It makes sense that there would be. So I think that there are some things happening. There have been reports about, I would say, somewhat sophisticated fentanyl labs in Canada. And the fact of the matter is that there's a very low barrier of entry to manufacturing fentanyl. That's also part of this issue that we're going to face going forward with many synthetic drugs, is that the barrier of entry is not that high. And with artificial intelligence coming into play, it's going to be the barrier is going to be even lower for people to enter into this market, which can perversely also have a positive effect, because if you have more players, you might dilute the power of these large criminal groups because you'll have so many smaller players. So ironically, you might get a steadiness of the supply, or maybe even an increase of the supply, or perhaps a diversification of the supply. And all of those things may dilute the power of large criminal groups like the Sinaloa Cartel or the Jalisco Cartel, because they just can't control all these independent players.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Well, in recent news last week, a leader of the Sinaloa Cartel arrested in Salem as part of a large fentanyl bust. DEA is calling it the largest fentanyl seizure in U.S. history. Do you hear about that?
In Oregon, then.
Yeah, in Oregon.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that the reality of these markets is that we can talk all day and night about all the different mechanisms that we're going to use to shore up the border, to stop the flow of immigration, to stop the flow of, perhaps immigration is a slightly different topic, but immigration versus fentanyl. I mean, fentanyl is just comes across in such small quantities, and you need so little of it that it's not even right to say it's an uphill battle. It's impossible. You're not going to be able to stop this. There's a reason that these things are now, $1 a pill in some places. There's a reason that people are now readily smoking 5 pills at a shot. That's because it's so cheap. And the reason it's cheap is because there's an abundance of supply. You don't need that much to satisfy the market. And that's true with so many synthetic drugs. So when we sit down and try and figure out how to deal with synthetic drugs, and we focus all of our efforts and emphasis and resources on supply side solutions, we are missing a giant part of this equation.
What's that?
Then we have to deal with the fact that we are not going to stop this. That this is way more difficult than marijuana, way more difficult than cocaine, way more difficult than heroin. Any of these legacy organic drugs are so much easier to deal with from a supply side approach. And when I say supply side approach, I mean the act of trying to intercept or repress supply in some way so that people don't consume it.